Hide your kids. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, it's often said that the children are our future. And of course, that's exactly why the left wants to take them from parents who don't buy into their twisted agenda. Everywhere you look, in myriad ways, forces are working overtime to undermine parental rights and their Judeo-Christian values. From teachers' unions to gender activists to Biden's vaccine pushers, we're seeing a concerted effort, backed by some of the biggest financial interests out there, to indoctrinate our children into a dark mindset of anti-Americanism. Now, this new normal requires the undermining of American history. It involves teaching concepts directly at odds with the ideal of the nuclear family. Now, on the COVID issue, government and so-called public health experts are trying to force your kids to get injected with an experimental COVID vaccine, whether you want them to or not. As the angle revealed last night, the Biden administration is about to take their pressure campaign to your doorstep.
We are going to continue to press to get 12 to 18-year-olds vaccinated, to continue to work with communities where there's lower vaccination rates. That's one of the reasons we initiated these strike forces to go into communities and work with them to determine what they need.
Strike forces? President Xi must be very proud, that language. Now, but today, HHS Secretary Becerra took it to an even more sinister level. Biden's vaccine militia will apparently be asking household adults questions about the family's vaccine status, and God knows what else.
Perhaps we should point out that the federal government has had to spend trillions of dollars to try to keep Americans alive during this pandemic. So it is absolutely the government's business. It is taxpayers' business if we have to continue to spend money to try to keep people from contracting COVID and helping reopen the economy. Knocking on a door has never been against the law.
First, Javier, it's not your department's role to pry into the medical decisions of American citizens. Second, the economy is already reopened and has been for a year in red states. Third, we trust parents, not the bureaucrats who've misled us consistently, to make important family health decisions. Now, Republican officials are already pushing back, and this is great. Missouri's Governor Mike Parson politely told the feds to take their vaccine evangelization elsewhere. And the Arizona AG, in a letter to President Biden, raised the issue of medical privacy, writing, "I will not tolerate such intrusions within Arizona. If Americans are on the fence about taking the COVID-19 vaccine, it would be most inappropriate for bureaucrats to single them out, regardless of motivations or intentions." Now, the White House is claiming that it's not going to keep vaccination data, a database, and that all door knockers are just going to be volunteers, so don't worry about it. But given their raw obsession with vaccinating kids who rarely get ill from COVID, no wonder few trust them. Now, things are so bad in my old home state of Connecticut that parents there are suing to enjoin a new law that requires kindergartners to be vaccinated even if it violates parents' religious beliefs. But when it comes to directly violating parental rights, D.C. takes the cake. Now, in a story we brought you last night, new legislation there allows children as young as 11 years old to get any vaccine, including COVID-19's, without parental consent. The attorney representing the father who's suing D.C. in federal court over this appeared on the Ingraham angle last night.
The law actually requires the doctor, the school, the health insurance company, and the health department to all actively conceal from the parent that the child has received the vaccine. This law is not only encouraging lying, it actually mandates by law an elaborate scheme of lying to their own parent.
Unbelievable. Now, it's not just Connecticut and D.C. subverting parental rights. Alabama allows 14-year-olds to get the vaccine without parental consent. Oregon allows 15-year-olds to get it. And in Rhode Island and South Carolina, you can get it at 16. Now, this is just unacceptable. None of these states allow tattoos for those under the age of 18 without parental permission, but they're allowing minors to get an experimental drug? A brand new study out of England revealing tonight that children are even more resilient to COVID than we actually thought. Some 99.995% of the 469,982 children in England who were infected during the year examined by researchers survived. But that doesn't matter to the left. And it's not going to stop their anti-parental trends, which are perhaps most pernicious in our schools. Now, if kids aren't being bombarded by nonstop hectoring on race and white privilege, they're being forced to read sexually explicit books with little to no literary value. Chicago takes things a step further from reading assignments focused on sex to actually encouraging students to have sex. Free condoms for fifth graders, isn't that nifty? Forget that this also means encouraging fifth graders to violate Illinois law that prohibits sex with minors. No big deal there. But parents, I gotta say, don't worry, because the experts say that condoms in elementary schools will stop the bad stuff from happening. Now, left-wing educrats who relish pushing the sexual envelope and redefining gender have zero respect for parental boundaries. Conversations that are best left between parents and their children are being short-circuited in states like California and New York. And by the way, remember, one of New York's fanciest schools is teaching first graders about masturbation. And when adults cry foul, as we have against things like critical race theory being taught in our schools, the elites and their activist base, they move into smear mode. And of course, they don't hesitate to lie.
Culture warriors are labeling any discussion of race, racism, or discrimination as CRT to try to make it toxic. They are bullying teachers and trying to stop us from teaching students accurate history.
Accurate history, Randy? Topping the list of suggested reading for teachers and high school students is, of course, the book How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. It's filled with historical inaccuracies and totalitarian policy ideas. Remember, Ibram writes that capitalism is essentially racist, and racism is essentially capitalist. Oh, how clever. I guess that means everyone who works then is racist. Kids, that means your parents then are part of the problem. And they immediately, those parents of yours need to begin their never-ending re-education in anti-racism. And if you even raise the slightest doubt about white privilege or this concept of systemic racism, Democrat state media, they will defame you.
Followers of QAnon, who are now using the battle cry to similarly target school boards, with many who have espoused QAnon's theories now melding their own conspiracies with the lies about critical race theory.
That's so weak. Parents of all races and ethnicities who are raising concerns about their kids' education, which, by the way, they pay for. That's like QAnon? Joy. Well, totalitarian societies depend on propagandizing, and their leaders ruthlessly enforce its dissemination. Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. That was from Vladimir Lenin. We can't afford to give our would-be cultural totalitarians 4 more weeks with our kids, let alone 4 more years. And that's the angle.